When the lawyer said my name instead of my daughter's, Claire's hand stopped halfway to her husband's. She had already started reaching for him, ready to squeeze his fingers when the house and lake property were read aloud. Everyone knew the script. My husband built a construction empire from nothing. The Maple Street Colonial, the Wisconsin Lake House, the vintage cars. All of it had to be going to her. After all, I had spent 37 years in the background. But then the lawyer adjusted his glasses and said clearly, "To my wife Margaret, I leave $5 million in liquid assets and all commercial properties held in my name." Claire's hand froze midair. And for the first time in my 71 years of life, I felt visible. For 37 years, I mastered the art of disappearing. It happened slowly, one compromise at a time, one silence after another. My husband, Richard, filled every room he entered. I stood beside him at parties, smiling, holding drinks. I hosted dinners where his business partner shook his hand twice and barely nodded at me. I raised Claire, packed her lunches, sat through parent-teacher conferences alone. I was proud of our life. But somewhere along the way I stopped being a person in it. I remember a Tuesday in 1994. Richard had closed the deal that doubled his company. That night on the back porch, after 2 hours of him talking, he looked at me and asked, "What do you think, Margie?" I almost said something true. Instead I said, "I think you earned every bit of it." He smiled and went inside. I stayed on the porch, wondering why the right words never came. He passed on a quiet Tuesday in November. I held his hand when he took his last breath. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with all the words I never said, all the times I stepped aside so someone else could step forward. For the first time in decades, there was no shadow to stand behind. And I didn't know who I was without it. Claire arrived 3 days later from Chicago. She hugged me briefly at the door. "How are you holding up?" I wanted to say, "I'm lost. I don't know who I am when no one needs me." Instead I said, "I'm managing." That evening, I found her in Richard's study, holding a photograph from his desk. For a moment her face was unguarded, the little girl who used to climb into his lap. Then she noticed me and the mask slid back. I was just, "There's so much to organize." "I know." She straightened her blouse, became the efficient daughter again. But for one breath I had seen her. I wondered if she had ever seen me. The reading was scheduled the following week. I wore a simple navy dress. I didn't expect anything special. At the lawyer's office, Claire sat upright, composed, crossing her ankles the way she always did when preparing for good news. The lawyer began reading. "To my daughter Claire, I leave the family home on Maple Street, the lake house and my vintage cars." Claire exhaled softly. That sounded right. She reached for her husband's hand. Then the lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses. "And to my wife Margaret, I leave $5 million in liquid assets and all commercial properties held in my name." Silence filled the room. Claire's hand stopped midair. Her husband's jaw tightened. They both turned to look at me, really look as if seeing me for the first time. "That can't be right," Claire said. The lawyer reviewed the documents, confirmed the numbers. And as he spoke, I realized something that shifted quietly inside me. For 37 years I thought I had been invisible. But somehow, on that back porch in 1994, in 1,000 small moments I had dismissed, he had seen me. The lawyer kept speaking, reviewing numbers, but I barely heard him. Claire was staring at me. Not through me. At me. When the meeting ended, no one spoke to me directly. In the parking garage she turned. "Did you know?" "No." "You had no idea he was leaving you all of that?" "I didn't know the numbers. Your father handled those things." She let out a short breath. "That's convenient." The word hung between us. She insisted on driving back. I watched her in the rearview mirror, jaw set the way it used to be when she lost debates in high school. "It doesn't make sense," she said. "The house, the lake place, the cars, that's sentimental. The real assets went to you." I said nothing. I worked for him, Mom. Summers. He always said I'd understand the business best. You do. Then why wouldn't he split it evenly? He must have had a reason. She glanced at me. Do you think this is fair? Fair. I had never once asked myself that word. I think your father thought it through. That's not what I asked. Her husband shifted. Claire. No. I just want to understand. So did I. Inside, she paced the living room. $5 million. That's not just security. That's control. I looked at her. Control. Yes. The properties, the assets, that's influence. Leverage. She crossed her arms. You've never handled that kind of responsibility. It wasn't cruel. It was clinical. You're 71. Taxes alone. I can learn. She stopped pacing. What? I can learn, I repeated. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. I'm not incapable. I just never needed to. Her eyes searched my face. You never wanted to. That one landed. For a long time it was easier not to. The room grew quiet. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, the same house Claire now owned. She had the memories. I had the future. Near midnight, light spilled from Richard's study. Claire sat at his desk, holding an old company ledger. Could he have changed it when he got sick? She murmured. I stepped into the doorway. He was clear-minded. She looked up. I'm not accusing you. I just need to understand why. Why what? Why you? The honesty stunned us both. I sat across from her. For years, she said softly, I thought I was carrying his legacy, the ambition, the drive. You are. Then why leave the real power to you? Power. I thought about the back porch in 1994. The question I never answered truthfully. I don't think he saw it as power. I think he saw it as protection. For you. Yes. She stared at the desk. I don't need protecting. I realized then that maybe that was the point. Maybe he knew she didn't. When she went upstairs, I stayed. I sat in Richard's chair for the first time. It felt larger than I expected. For 37 years I had chosen silence. Now suddenly I had been handed a voice. The question was no longer whether he had seen me. The question was whether I was ready to be seen. And judging by the look in my daughter's eyes, this was only the beginning. By morning the house felt divided. Claire was already at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, phone in hand. I spoke to someone, she said. I poured my tea slowly. About a lawyer. I needed to understand the options. Undue influence. Mental capacity. Changes made under stress. And he said it would be difficult to contest. She paused. But not impossible. I said nothing. By noon relatives started calling. Word travels fast when money's involved. My sister Patricia left a voicemail sweet but sharp underneath. $5 million is quite a surprise, Maggie. Claire followed me into the garden that afternoon. Mom, if I challenge it, it's not about greed. It's about whether Dad was manipulated. I kept trimming dead blooms. I don't mean by you, she added quickly. I just mean circumstances. I stood slowly. Your father wrote that will 2 years ago. Before the diagnosis. She didn't answer. You think I pressured him? I don't know what to think. That was worse than accusation. That night, her husband knocked softly. Claire's scared, he said, of being replaced. She always believed she carried his legacy. When the assets went to you, it felt like a message. What message? That she wasn't enough. I sat on the edge of the bed. For 37 years, I never competed with my daughter. I know. But she did. The next morning, I found a copy of the will slipped under my door. Sections highlighted. On the last page, Claire had written, "Why not equal?" I traced the ink. Something unfamiliar was rising in me. Not anger. Clarity. I called the lawyer myself. I'd like copies of everything. Original drafts. Dates. Of course. Everything was executed properly. I know. That afternoon I sat at Richard's desk. Not as an observer, but as the person responsible. I reviewed dates. 2 years ago. 6 months before his first hospital visit. Witnessed. Notarized. Deliberate. Intentional. No manipulation. Only decision. That evening Claire stood in the doorway. You're preparing. Yes. For court. For truth. She crossed her arms. You really wouldn't reconsider? You'd let this tear us apart. I looked at her for a long moment. For 37 years I gave away pieces of myself because it was easier than arguing. My voice didn't waver. I'm not doing that anymore. Silence. I'm not the one pulling. Later, alone in the dark, I understood fully. This wasn't about $5 million. It was about identity. About who had been seen. About who had been chosen. For the first time in my life I was choosing myself. The problem was, I wasn't sure my daughter could forgive me for it. The papers were filed 3 days later. A formal request for review. Claire didn't tell me directly. The notification arrived by courier, thick envelope, clinical language. I read it at the dining table where we used to celebrate birthdays. She stood in the doorway. I had to. I folded the papers neatly. No. You wanted to. This isn't an attack. It feels like one. That afternoon I drove to the bank alone. For years, I had sat in waiting rooms while Richard handled important matters. Now the manager greeted me differently. In a private office, I signed forms transferring asset oversight into my name. Investments. Holdings. Counts I had never seen. It was dizzying. Not the numbers. The realization. I had been trusted with this. Intentionally. When I returned home, Claire was in the study again. But this time she wasn't searching drawers. She was sitting very still. There's something you should see. On the desk lay a sealed envelope. My name in Richard's handwriting. The softer one. The one he used for Christmas cards. Where? Behind the insurance documents. Inside was a single sheet. No legal language. Just words. Maggie, if you're reading this, Claire is questioning the will. She will think it's about fairness. It isn't. I left the operational legacy to her long ago. She knows how to build. She never doubted her place. You did. I stopped breathing. For years, I mistook your quiet for contentment. It wasn't until the night on the porch, when you almost said something and didn't, that I realized how much of yourself you had folded away. This is not about money. It is about weight. Claire carries ambition easily. You carry responsibility quietly. I know which one will lose sleep over $5 million. If Claire challenges this, do not fight her with anger. She will understand eventually. She always does. Richard. I handed her the letter. She read slowly. Halfway through, her posture changed. By the end, her hands trembled. He thought I wouldn't lose sleep? She asked quietly. It wasn't an insult. She sat in his chair. He thought you doubted your place? For a long time. I never saw that. I didn't show it. Silence. Different now. Less sharp. More exposed. The request is still filed, she said. I know. I can withdraw it. You don't have to decide tonight. She looked at the letter. He believed in you. He always did. For the wrong reasons. Her voice caught. He believed I was strong enough not to need him. And he believed you were strong enough to survive without being seen. The realization hung there. Both of us misunderstood in different ways. That night I sat alone on the back porch. The same porch. The same quiet air. For decades, I had waited for someone to confirm my worth. Richard had done it in the only language he knew. Claire had spent her life trying to earn something she already had. The legal request could be withdrawn. The money could stay. But something more delicate was at stake now. Trust. And for the first time since the reading I wondered, not whether Claire would forgive me, but whether she would forgive him. The next morning the house felt lighter. Sunlight poured through the windows, highlighting dust motes that had always been there but never noticed. I moved slowly, savoring the quiet, as though I had been holding my breath for decades without realizing it. Claire came down later, carrying a tray with 2 mugs of tea. She hesitated, then placed it on the table. "Morning," she said softly. I nodded, smiling faintly. "Morning." For a long moment we didn't speak. The air was no longer charged with suspicion. It was tentative, fragile, but hopeful. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part. Finally, she broke the silence. "I read the letter again last night. And..." Her eyes met mine, clear and honest. "I think I understood something I didn't before. It wasn't about the money. It was about seeing you. About knowing you mattered." I nodded, throat tight. For years I thought I had to disappear so others could shine. He saw me, even when I didn't see myself. Drop a comment below if you've ever felt invisible in your own life. Let's talk about it. She sat down across from me. I never realized how much I was missing, how much I took for granted. "You were a child once," I said gently. "You had no way of knowing the weight I carried." Her lips quivered. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything I didn't see. For every time I assumed you were just background." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I forgive you. But more than forgiveness, I want us to see each other now. Truly see each other." Claire's grip tightened. "I want that too." For a while we simply sat, drinking tea, letting the quiet settle between us. It was no longer heavy. It was filled with possibility. Later I walked through the house, touching surfaces I had overlooked. Richard's desk. The bookshelves. Everything carried his presence, but now I saw my own as well. If you're enjoying this story, make sure you hit that bell icon to get notified when the next story drops. The foundation came to mind, the idea I had been nurturing since the reading. A fund for women like me. Women who had spent decades making others visible and themselves invisible. I would call it the Holloway Fund after him because his love made it possible. But it would also be mine. By evening, Claire helped me carry boxes from the attic. "You're going to be busy," she said, smiling. "Yes," I admitted. "For the first time in decades, I am going to be busy for me." We talked then about small things. About memories. About mistakes. The conversation was uneven, jagged, real. Pauses, laughter, quiet tears. Each one stitched us back together. That night I sat on the back porch. The roses Richard planted decades ago were in full bloom. The sky bled into shades of purple and gold. For the first time I felt a sense of completion, not because the money was mine but because I was finally present in my own life. Claire joined me with 2 cups of tea, sitting beside me without needing to speak. Together we watched the sun dip below the horizon. "I don't want to leave things unsaid anymore," she said quietly. "Nor do I." Comment below if you think money can really change relationships, or if it's always about something deeper.